was beep, boop, bop, beep, beep, boop, bop, beep, beep.
wall.e. Imagine if I reviewed this film by only saying my name like the main protagonist. But first, 3 fun facts. Fact number 1. wall.e stands for Waste Allocation Load Lifter Earth Class. And EVE stands for Extraterrestrial Vegetation Evaluator. Fact number 2. This was actually one of Pixar's first ideas for a film. They thought of the idea of a robot left on Earth to clean it up, but scrapped the idea because they had a hard time writing a movie where the entire setting was on Earth after humans left, but they came back to the idea and added the stuff with Eve and entering the spaceship. Fact number 3. The cockroach and the Twinkie is a reference to the myth that if the world was to end, then those things would survive. Anyways, wall.e. There seems to be a decent amount of folk who think the first half is great, but falls apart when they board the human ship. But I say, the whole movie is good. Besides, sure, it was cute to have a good portion of the movie dedicated to wall.e showing Eve around his home and the post-apocalyptic Earth, and how he falls in love with another robot, but after a while that would get old. I like the second half of the movie with the whole adventure aboard the ship and them trying to get the plant back. I like that it's an environmental message that doesn't hammer it into your skull. The robot characters are the best in this, and you can't help but hope that wall.e ends up with Eve, since he's a rusty old lonely robot who finally meets this beautiful, in his eyes at least, shiny robot. It's weird how we get so much emotion and expression out of these robots, considering they're robots that don't even talk in full sentences. I should mention that I also like Mo, the cleaner robot. He was pretty funny. As for the human characters, I kinda like that they're there. Bit of a warning that too much reliance on technology isn't the best. As for the captain is one thick bick. Also, I'm sure a lot of stoners will relate deeply with Otto.
Fine, you don't keep a secret from the captain. Tell me what's classified.
But jokes aside, Otto is actually a pretty good villain, and you can't help but kind of feel for him for wanting to stay on the ship because, you know, he doesn't want to be obsolete. Also, I should mention that the whole Axiom is a very cool place, like it's well animated and creative in some aspects. Anyways, did it deserve to win an Oscar? Well, I'd personally say Kung Fu Panda is better, though this isn't a bad choice. After all, we'll get to bad choices later.
Squirrel!
Anyways, before we talk about Up, let's go up with 3 fun facts. Fact number 1. A group of people made a life-sized house with nothing in it, and a bunch of balloons and made it float because of this film. Fact number 2. It's worth noting that Up was also nominated for Best Picture as well, not just animated feature. Fact number 3. It all started when Pete drew a picture of an old man holding 100 balloons, that eventually became a movie. Anyways, there's 2 things this movie is famous for. 1, making people cry within the first 10 minutes, and 2, being really bonkers. Flying house, dog flying planes. Anyways, Up is a cute family adventure movie, with likable characters and a unique story that's both funny and sad at times. When I say that, I mean that it's both a story about an old man trying to fulfill his deceased wife's dream of visiting Paradise Falls, while also being an adventure movie about 2 people trying to protect a colorful bird from a madman. It's a fun movie for kids while also not being dumbed down in the slightest. I also like how one of the main characters is a grumpy old man and the other is an energetic young boy, and that they eventually get along and he even becomes kind of a grandpa figure to him. I'll also say this, it's quite insane and bizarre. Dogs flying airplanes and shooting using squeaky toys, a Doberman with the voice of a chipmunk, and a fight scene between 2 elders. Okay, now did it deserve the Oscar? While it is a great film, I do feel like there is one animated movie in particular that truly feels like something unique. I personally think Fantastic Mr. Fox should have been the winner of this year. It has a better story and more style and charm to it, and it's more artistic overall. I'm just a big fan of Wes Anderson's style. But hey, at least Up is a good movie. It's a fun, entertaining family adventure. And I would put it above Coraline and The Secret of Kells, 2 other animated movies that were nominated that I saw.
To infinity and beyond!
Okay, now it's time we talk Toy Story 3. But first, 3 fun facts. Andy's imagination was originally thought to be in the first Toy Story, but they didn't. though they got to use it in this one instead. Fact number 2. The villain, Lotso Huggin' Bear, was originally planned to be a toy from the Care Bears line, but the toy company that makes the Care Bears toys didn't like the idea of a Care Bear being evil in the movie. The crew watched a bunch of prison escape movies to help them for their own prison escape scene from the Sunnyside Daycare. According to the director, they watched what felt like every prison escape movie under the sun. Anyways, onto the review. Everyone says this movie is amazing. Everyone says it's a masterpiece. What do I think? It's good. A good film, not as good as 2 though. Okay, let me explain. I like this movie, but there's a few things that prevents it from being as good as its predecessors. But first, let's talk about what does work. It's a good move to have the movie be about what does happen when Andy grows up, and how the toys take it. It's nice how Woody is still loyal to him, and even accepts the fact that he's growing up and understands. I also like how the stakes can be surprisingly high at times, like when they're trying to escape from the Sunnyside Daycare. And it still has the Toy Story charm. The humor, the heart, and all the memorable, lovable characters. Okay, now on to what doesn't work about the film and why it's not as good as the first 2. Well, for starters, most of the new characters aren't all that great. The only ones I remember outside of their design are Big Baby and Chuckles the Clown. And Ken, cause he's pretty friggin' hilarious. Big Baby is both creepy and cute, and you'll end up feeling bad for him. And Chuckles the Clown is interesting despite his short appearance. As for the villain Lotso Huggin' Bear, he kinda reminds me a lot of the Prospector from the second movie, except here he's more sadistic and evil. I kinda prefer the Prospector since I can understand where he's coming from and feel sorry for him. Well, Lotso Huggin' Bear is just Hitler in the body of a toy. He works as a villain, we're not supposed to like him after all, but his turn to darkness doesn't make 100% sense to me, but I'm not going to explain that much, since the video will be too long. And another problem I have with this movie is that the film tries way too hard to make you cry at times. It's definitely not one of those so upsetting you can only watch it once type films, but let me explain. The first 2 films blended comedy and drama very well, while Toy Story 3 does seem to force drama at times. Like, did anyone really think they would kill off all the main characters at the incinerator scene? And the ending. Well, yeah, it can be sad to have to grow up and say goodbye to your childhood things. I feel like they overdid it and made it cheesy. But I do like this movie a lot. It's still a fun ride that's funny and heartwarming, and it's still Toy Story. How can you not be happy to see these characters again? It's also good that even though they don't have Andy anymore, the toys still have each other. Do I think it deserved the Oscar? Actually, there is another animated movie that came out the same year. No, not that one. That I feel is pretty darn underrated and is really worthy of an Oscar due to its great writing and characters and such. Anyways, next review. Oh look! Another non-Disney or Pixar movie. But first, 3 fun facts. Fact number 1. Instead of doing voice recording in booths like most animated films, most of the voiceover work was done on an actual set, sometimes in costume, with their fellow cast members. None of this was mocap. The same technique was used for making the movie Shark Tale. Fact number 2. Instead of riding roadrunners like horses in the movie, they were originally going to ride tarantulas. Fact number 3. This is Gore Verbinski's only animated film he directed. Anyways, I love this movie. It's a good story with great animation and memorable characters. I like how it's a Western film that feels fresh and unique, while also still feeling like a Western despite its surrealism. Like what other movie do you know that has a chase scene involving a toad shooting bats, or the Spirit of the West being Clint Eastwood? The animation in this is the best. The desert and the town of Dirt look great and are atmospheric, and the character designs, some of the best. I like how different they look from most other animated animals. Like, they don't try to make them really cutesy. The characters look often quite bizarre, creepy, and ugly. It really adds to the charm and humor. Despite their weird appearance, they're quite appealing at the same time. Also, the characters are great, both the main and some of the minor. Rango himself is both a well-developed and funny character. A lot of the supporting cast is fun to watch in their own way, and Rattlesnake Jake is an awesome badass villain. And the movie references are cool, like little nods to other films, and not in a dumb, forced way. I do have one problem with it though. The plot point of Rango lying about being a big shot when he's really not, it's a cliche that's been done so many times, and we all know how it's going to go down. Anyways, do I think it deserved the Oscar? Yeah, I'd say so. I like some of the other films that were nominated that year, but I think this one is the most unique and original. Ladies and gentlemen, the most controversial winner. But first, 3 fun facts. Fact number 1. The original title for this movie was Bear and the Bow. Fact number 2. Merida was officially considered a Disney princess, even though the director wasn't really great on that idea. Fact number 3. A short film attached to the DVD and Blu-ray goes more in depth on the main villain of the movie. Anyways, as I said, Brave is probably the most controversial winner. Although it's not a deeply hated movie by any means, it was up against some really good competition. And when it won against much more beloved animated films, I think this was a general consensus.
You gotta be fucking kidding me!
Anyways, what can I say about this movie? What do I think? It's okay. Just okay, I guess. I mean, the animation looks nice and there's some good shots of medieval Scotland, but knowing the company that made this film, that's a given. Also, some of the characters, like the 3 lords, can be fun and entertaining to watch. Also, the character designs are nicely stylized while also fitting into the realistic backgrounds, not feeling too generic like other princess movies. But what doesn't work about the film? Well, just the premise alone. Our main character wants to go out and have more in her life than just being the daughter of the king. Gee, haven't heard that one before. But this still has potential to be a big, great adventure, right? Wrong. Instead, her mother gets turned into a bear and it becomes a story where Merida must babysit her bear mother and keep her away from the other people since hunting was at its most popular back then. So yeah, it could have been this grand adventure, but it's not really. Also, I don't like how the movie never calls out our main protagonist for letting the witch turn her mother into a bear. I mean, it was kind of Merida's fault. Also, a lot of the humor wasn't really that funny, and some of it was kind of juvenile and lowbrow. Did it deserve the Oscar? I hate to say it, but all the other nominees were better. Yeah. I feel like even if you disagree with some of the past winners getting the gold, you could at least kinda see why they won. Here there doesn't seem to be a justification for this generic been there done that kind of movie to beat more original creative movies with more heart put into them, and I'm far from the only one who agrees. Overall, not a horrible movie, but a weak choice for a year that saw lots of great animated movies. Let it go, let it go. I'm just gonna say it, I'm not really big on Frozen. But first, 3 fun facts. Fact number 1. Elsa was originally intended to be a villain, but her singing Let It Go made them realize that she was too sympathetic. Fact number 2. Elsa's ice castle needed 50 people to animate. Fact number 3. The reason Olaf is called Olaf is because he's the comic relief, and it sounds close to Olaf. Anyways, before you Frozen fans come nail me to a cross or something, let me just say this. There are quite a few things I like about this movie. The background animations are nice, and so are the snow power effects. And occasionally this movie did make me chuckle. But what didn't I like about this movie? Well, for starters, the character designs looked a little generic to me. Heck, they look almost identical to most other Disney films. Not to mention some of the characters look very identical to one another. I also find the story itself to be kind of like there's some plot holes and for the most part nothing major happens, so the whole adventure feels kind of not very exciting. There is also several plot holes like where did Elsa get her powers? And why doesn't Anne just tell Elsa about her powers and what happened? Also, the villain twist comes out of nowhere, and felt shoehorned in there just to have a villain in the movie. Also, the worst characters in the movies are the friggin' rock trolls because they're pointless and annoying. I would explain more, but I don't have time for that. With all that, you probably think I hate the movie. Well, I don't, actually. The 3 main characters work well off each other, that I can get enjoyment watching it. Do I think it deserved to win the Oscar? Well, I personally wouldn't have voted for it. But knowing how many people love this movie, it's probably a good thing that it won. But in 2013, we found out something awful. It was found out that there are these goddamn motherfucking barnacle heads who don't even watch the animated films. They just take their kids, leave the theater, and ask which one they enjoyed most. They just assume because it's animated, there's nothing more to it than mindless garbage. Meanwhile, a lot of animated films are more mature than certain live-action films. It's insulting to anyone who worked on these films, the voters who actually watched the fucking films, and anyone who gives a shit about filmmaking in general. It's reasons like this why I don't hold the Oscars in that high regards. Anyways, that's it for part 2. See you next time.